Hello all you beautiful people out there, what is going on? This is your friend Brady coming as fast with another Predecessor vs. Fault video, and this is the part 2 to the original video that I released 3.5 months ago, which you guys should check out. I highly recommend you do, so you guys get the full context before going into this video, because I will not be reiterating every single point that I made in that video. So please, I do recommend, highly recommend you guys see that video first before diving into this one. And if you have already seen that video and you're good to go, we can get right into this one, but not before sending it over to a different version of Riddick, who's going to thank our sponsor for today's video. This video is sponsored by Ultimate Rivals The Rink, created by Bitfry Game Studios Inc. Ultimate Rivals The Rink is only one of the many games coming to the Ultimate Rivals universe, one being Ultimate Rivals The Court, coming next year. I really enjoyed playing the game off camera and also on camera in front of you guys on stream, as it reminded me of those older arcadey sports games that I used to play all the time growing up as a kid. Ultimate Rivals The Rink is a 3v3 hockey game, but with a very interesting twist, where you can play as athletes from different sports, including basketball, football, baseball, and women's sports like women's basketball, and you can even play as some of the members of the Women's USA football team. And it's very, very cool because it's a very arcadey, relaxed game, but it's also really fun and can get very competitive when you play with your friends. You can choose who you want to be your goalie and your two skaters, and they have their own ultimate abilities depending on what sport they come from. The different players and different athletes from different sports have different ultimates, such as trying to tackle somebody as a football player or trying to pitch a baseball that will knock somebody out. If you guys are interested, there is a link in the description below. The game will be available on Apple Arcade right now, and it's coming to console and PC later. Okay, let's get into the video. In the previous video, we talked about 5 key facets and components when comparing the two games. We talked about visuals, gameplay feedback, item system, map design / jungle, and the Paragon feel of the game. Which game felt more like Paragon? As a quick update, I preferred Predecessor when it came to the visuals, simply due to the HUD being there, whereas Fault didn't have their HUD yet. Gameplay and feedback, I preferred Predecessor just because it felt like there was more oomph when I was getting hit and when I was hitting other people. When it came to the item system, I actually preferred Fault at the time because the item system in Predecessor was still very basic. They didn't have fun actives that you could use or fun starter items that you could bring into the jungle, so that's why I preferred Fault. For the map design and the jungle layout, I preferred Fault as well, specifically considering the fact that there was no red buff or blue buff at the time in the Predecessor closed alpha jungle, and it provided for more invigorating and deep jungling gameplay, especially as a jungle main as myself, so that's why I preferred Fault. And then as for the Paragon feel of the game, I stated that Predecessor had more of a Paragon feel to the game. In this video, we're going to talk about what has changed in the last 3.5 months, comparing the two companies and the progress that they have made, and then at the end, talking once again in the comparison of which game you should play. Now, when it comes to the visuals, not much has changed when it came to Predecessor. The previous closed alpha compared to the one that we just had recently, I didn't really notice too many different visual effects, apart from, of course, the new characters that were added in, but we'll get to that here in a minute, okay? The visuals themselves, I didn't notice anything crazy different, okay? You still had the buffs, you still had the text popping up on screen. When you secured a buff, it was telling you what it did and how much time was left on the left side of the screen. When you killed Fangtooth, it told you what exactly you got out of killing Fangtooth. When you killed Or Prime, same thing. So when it came to the visuals, nothing really changed, except for the item art, which I will bring up in the item system, of course. So when it came to that, Predecessor was already pretty good, and I already stated this in my first video that Predecessor already had very solid visuals between the gameplay and between the abilities looking really clean and between the general graphical fidelity of the map itself. Fringe did a really good job with the map. And of course, pairing it with the HUD that was already existent, tied it up very nicely as a nice little gift for us all to enjoy. Now, when it came to Fault, their visuals did improve slightly with the addition of item art. Before, it was just little symbols, placeholder symbols, and colors that represented the different aspects, families that the items belong to. But now they actually have item art for pretty much every single item in the game. In fact, every single item in the game, if I remember correctly at this point. and it does look a lot better. I can actually kind of tell and remember what the items look like. For example, if I forget an item name, I can remember, oh wait, but that's that gun sword thing. Ah, yeah, Infernal Gunblade, there we go. There's the item that I'm looking for. So Fault did actually improve in that sense. However, the big glaring issue is that there is still no HUD. And this isn't really the issue towards Strange Matter Studios, because they're actually outsourcing the HUD to a third party, to a AAA studio apparently that has worked on other games as HUDs as well. And there's just a lot of delays, there's a lot of back and forth, the process is longer. Whereas when it comes to Omega Studios and Predecessor, they do every single thing in-house, so they can crank these things out a bit quicker. So in this regard, regardless of what is going on, whose fault it is, and why there's a delay, the facts still remain that Predecessor does look prettier, and the visuals remain to be strong with the Force when it comes to Omega Studios' game Predecessor. So I'm going to keep that tally on Predecessor's side. Let's move on to the gameplay and feedback. Now, Fault has made a lot of improvements to gameplay and feedback. A lot. They have optimized the game very, very well. Before, if you were to get drops or lag spikes, now you get barely nothing unless you are really, really pushing your rig. If you're playing the game in the settings that you're supposed to be playing them on, the game runs very, very, very well. It is much better optimized than it used to be, and I'm incredibly happy. I know that turned a lot of people off in the beginning, but now when you play the game, it will actually work. When you click something, things will register. There doesn't seem to be any apparent glaring rubber banding unless it's your own internet issues, or if your ping is just really high because you're connecting to a different server across the world. It feels much better. When it comes to the feedback and oomph, not much noticeable changes have been made. Not many noticeable changes have been made. I just didn't really see anything super duper crazy. I'm pretty sure I just kind of got used to it at this point because I've been playing Fault for so long. But it does still have some room for improvement, in my opinion. Same thing when it comes to Predecessor. Not much has changed when it comes to the feedback elements of it. They have the same audio design as they did previously for the most part. Some things might have changed, but I didn't really notice those small details and differences. And the feedback felt very similar for Predecessor as well, so not much change between the 3.5 months. The gameplay in both games was pretty similar from their previous counterparts as well. I didn't feel too big of a difference, except what I will tell you is that the biggest difference between the gameplay between Predecessor and Fault was the time to kill. In the closed alpha this weekend that just passed, Predecessor's gameplay felt very, very fast. It had a very fast time to kill. It reminded me a lot of the League of Legends time to kill, where if you catch somebody out and you have at least another teammate or two with you, if you stun them, you lock them in that CC, you can burst them down pretty well and quickly if you have the right characters for it, which did feel pretty good. I really don't mind having the faster time to kill. It does reward catching people out of position. It rewards good plays when it comes to reading plays and timing it perfectly, and I like that about MOBAs. I like it because MOBAs are definitely a type of game where every single moment counts, and the slightest slip up can cause the biggest error and mistake for the enemy team. And I'm a very big fan of that. So I really did enjoy the time to kill when it came to Predecessor. The gameplay felt very fast because of this, and a lot of times what I noticed is people opted to just run around and go for kills rather than just sitting in the lane and farming, or sitting in the jungle and farming. And this is, at this point, it's really personal preference to what you prefer. Do you want to run around and focus more on the fighting aspect and the team fighting aspects of the MOBAs, or do you want to go a little slower, a little more tactical, and kind of think things through for your resources, what items you have versus what the enemy items have, and kind of work with the counter build options and stuff like that, which is really more towards the way that Fault is leaning. Fault is really leaning towards those higher IQ plays and just waiting for the very most perfect moment instead of just kind of running back in over and over again, trying to win as many team fights as you can. Now, I'm not saying one is better than the other. I think a lot of it is personal preference, and I know a lot of people who like one, and I know a lot of people who like the other, and I personally am okay with both. You guys are asking about my opinion. I'm okay with both. I can play Predecessor, I can play Fault, I can adapt to the high speed, violent speed, momentum gameplay, and I can adapt to the Fault a little chiller, a little slower, kind of ramping it up more as you start building your boots, as you start getting your items, because that's another thing. When it came to predecessors, they don't have boots, right? So you could just build straight into your first item and start killing. Whereas in Fault, usually you get your boots done first. If you're a jungler, you get your smite item first as well. And so you kind of have to ramp it up a little more. And so games tend to take longer. So the game time, the game length was quicker in Predecessor because of this, because of that faster paced gameplay. Now, when it comes to the gameplay, I don't care. I could do both. But the feedback, I will give this again to Predecessor. Since not much has changed from the previous video, I will give this one over to Predecessor, since I did feel a little bit more of that oomph and reaction when I got hit with the screen flashing and the proper audio design. I just overall think that the audio design is stronger in Predecessor, and that's contributing a lot more to the feedback that I'm feeling and to my overall enjoyment of the game. Strange Matter Studios has mentioned that they hired a brand new audio designer very, very recently, but we're not going to include that in this critique, as the audio design in that game is lackluster at best. Could definitely be better, especially sometimes when you're swinging your axe as Chimera and you're not hearing any auto attacks come through. There were some funny issues with that as well. So I'm going to give that over to Predecessor, and let's move on over to the item system, which, like I said, I preferred in Fault in the first video that I made, in the part 1 video that I made, because Predecessor and Omega Studios clearly stated that they're not really too concerned about the items and having so many crazy items that they have to worry about in the first couple of tests, because they're really focusing on how smooth the game runs, how well the servers run, etc, etc. And speaking of the servers, I will mention that the servers during the Predecessor closed alpha did have some hiccups. I did have a couple games where the servers would just completely crash and everybody would freeze and just start running into walls and nobody knew what was going on. I had some serious freezes that would take 2 to 3 seconds when I was playing Predecessor, whereas when I was playing Fault, their servers, you know, they're pretty solid servers. Never really have any issues. Definitely never had a server crash on me in the recent couple of months of me playing it. And when it comes to freezes, I don't usually get freezes the same way I did get them in Predecessor from time to time. Okay, it was pretty rare, but I just have to throw that out there just to make this as fair of a comparison as possible. But yeah, anyway, item system. Predecessor, this is the biggest change between the previous closed alpha and this closed alpha. Amongst the different changes, obviously, they included red buff and blue buff in the jungle, which we'll talk about in the next point, and they changed the way Fangtooth and Orb Prime works as well. The biggest change, of course, was the item system, and they added a plethora of items with a bunch of fun passives and unique actives, and it definitely made the gameplay experience much better and more fun and more in-depth, and I could actually play around with some builds, and I just genuinely enjoyed playing the Predecessor closed alpha this time around more than the previous closed alpha because of these items, because of the interesting build paths that I could take. Now, continuing with the Predecessor item system, they had a lot of inspiration from other MOBAs such as Dota 2, League of Legends, and even pulling from Paragon's very own Monolith era of items. Remember when you guys had the little gem system post V42 and the 3 cards? They pulled some items from those and just kind of incorporated into a more traditional MOBA item library. There is no deck building in either of these games. Both of these games use a traditional MOBA item library where all the items are available to everyone, so you are able to counter build and create a deeper and more thrilling competitive experience, which I personally prefer. Now, as for the items themselves, some of them were really good, some of them I didn't find quite useful, and I'm not going to sit here and harp on balance in a closed alpha. I realized that was not the point of this. The point of this is just to see how fun could the game be when you have an actual item system and not just some placeholder items, just to see how the game functions. Okay, this game felt more like a game and less like a test between this closed alpha and the previous closed alpha. However, as I mentioned, I don't want to harp on the balance, but there were some really good items, and then there were some really not so good items. I'm not going to bring up examples here as it doesn't really matter at this point. What I will say is a fantastic addition were the beginning starter items in the game. And I think everyone unilaterally agreed that these starting items were a fantastic addition to the game. Basically, you had these things called crests, where depending on your position, you would pick a different crest. If you were in solo lane or mid lane, or if you were a jungler, you would have a different crest that would give you different bonuses. And as you played through the game, most of these crests would actually evolve for free into an upgraded version that you didn't have to back to base to buy. For example, the Feral crest as a jungler gave you more damage against minions, as well as some other passive buffs, and you would use it on someone like Chimera, who had a spirit regeneration, so you wouldn't really worry about surviving the jungle minion camps. You would just want to kill them as quick as possible and clear them as quickly as possible. That would evolve into a crest that would give you the Smite active, which allowed you to do a lot of damage to a neutral jungle creep or an enemy minion such as Fangtooth, so it would help you secure those objectives faster. You needed to get 30 jungle minion kills, and that would evolve. And it was just such an interesting gameplay mechanic tied in with the item system. It just fused very well with the way the characters worked, and every character and every role had a crest that they were good with, and it just worked. And I really enjoyed it. I think that was the best part of the item system, and I really think that Omega Studio should keep that, as it definitely made it so that when you start the game off, you're already playing the game because you already have an item that helps you and helps you do more damage and makes you feel more useful. Like I said, it ramps up faster than the way that Fault does it with their item system. However, the item system in Fault is also really robust. A lot of the items have been around for a while, and they have been balanced appropriately. And because I didn't really harp much on the balance in Predecessor because there were a closed alpha, and that's not really what closed alphas work on, you have to remember that Fault is in a different state of development. They are in early access, which is essentially a pay-to-enter beta, technically speaking. I mean, who really knows nowadays? They can put whatever titles they want. We all know that Fortnite was in quote-unquote beta for like years and years and years, when we all knew it was just a full-fledged game anyway. But regardless, that's a side tangent. The reason I bring this up is because balance is a little important now, because the game is in early access. You want the game to evolve and play as if it's a fully functioning game, and balance is very important in MOBAs. So the team over there at Strange Matter Studios has had a lot of time to balance out these items, and a lot of the items are very useful depending on which character you're building. You build different items and different build paths, and you can counter a lot of characters or a lot of build paths with your build path. And it's a very robust item system, including the aspect system, which is built upon the objectives of Fangtooth and Orb Prime. And it's really good, rounded out, and I really enjoy that item system as well. Now, it's hard for me to pick an item system between these two games because they have two different kind of core philosophies around the item systems that they chose based on the state of development that the game is in. I can't really harp on Predecessor's item imbalance because they're a closed alpha, even though it did feel like there were some items, Combustion, that were really strong and felt like must-pick items for some roles. Whereas when it comes to Fault and Strange Matter Studios, a lot of those items are pretty variable, and it doesn't seem like one item is just superior to every single other item or vastly overpowered. It really does depend on which character you're playing and which characters you're playing against. And so, in that sense, I do want to side with the item system on Fault still, on this time around, just because I want to see how well Predecessor can balance out their item. Now let's talk about the map design in Jungle, and I'm just going to throw in the characters here as well. Like I said, because Strange Matter Studios and Fault are further along in their development, they are focused on producing more and more content at a quicker pace, and so they've released more characters than Omega Studios has in the last 3.5 months, whereas Omega Studios has released Lieutenant Bellica and Steel, which both feel really good. And both have very pretty visuals, and both have strained the hell out of my PC and caused a lot of frame drops while I was streaming because everything is just such high fidelity. Fault does have a larger roster, and they have been adding characters at a faster rate, whereas Steel and Bellica have been added to Predecessor since the last closed alpha. To Fault, the characters that have been added are Kalari, Grux, Decker, Grim. Fault also has cosmetics, whereas Predecessor does not. So I just want to throw that out there as well, that there are differences in the games depending on their development cycles and how far along they are. Now, as for the map design in Jungle, the biggest change to Predecessor's Jungle was the addition of the red buff and the blue buff, and the Fangtooth and Orb Prime spawning different buffs for you now when you kill them. So Fangtooth and Orprime have been reworked a little bit. Red buffs in the game, blue buffs in the game, and it definitely makes the jungle feel much better in Predecessor. But other than that, not much has changed. When it comes to Fault, the jungle also didn't really change too much. There was a camp that was removed from the red side of the jungle, but other than that, besides, you know, balancing some gold and experience, gifting the different levels of how much experience you would gain once you would kill a jungle minion, there wasn't too big of a shift. So both of these games didn't really change too much when it came to the map design and the layout itself. Now, you could argue that during the Halloween event, Strange Matter Studios came out with a really cool Halloween map, which I do admit, it was very spooky, it was very cool, I really enjoyed it, but I also played on the regular map just to kind of save some frames. That was just a personal preference, but I did really enjoy what Strange Matter Studios did with their map. It's hard to say because both maps I enjoyed and both jungles I enjoyed. Previously, I said that this one went to Fault just because I enjoyed the way the jungle worked more since Predecessor lacked red buff and blue buff in their enclosed alphas. However, I can't really pick one. I can't pick one. I like both. What I will tell you is that Predecessor said that they are working on a new map, or at least a newer variation of the current map that they have right now. They are looking to change some things. And Strange Matter Studios also said that their map is always subject to change. The jungle is always subject to change as well. So we'll see how these two pan out in the future and which one eventually captures my heart solely. However, I enjoyed both. I enjoyed jungling in both. I will say that the jungle in Predecessor seemed a little overtuned. I felt like I was just getting so much gold and just being so efficient between farming and ganking. Maybe I'm just kind of nuts. I don't know. I just feel like I've had a really easy time being a jungler when it comes to Predecessor, whereas in other MOBAs, the jungler is usually kind of like a supporting cast member to the other laners. I don't know. I don't care. That will come in balance. That will come in due time. So when it comes to map design and jungle, I really can't tell you which one I preferred. I liked both equally. I got it. I know it's a cop-out. I just got to give it a tie at this point in time. And then number 5, the Paragon feel of the game. I will remain in saying that Predecessor feels more like the original Paragon, and Fault feels more like something different. Not necessarily something bad, something different that I personally enjoy. And it seems like an evolution of Paragon going into a newer direction. And it really is up to you and personal preference on which one you like more. I gave like this big speech in the previous video that you guys should have seen already. I'm not going to do that speech over again. It really does depend on which one you want. Do you just want to play Paragon again? Or did you feel like Paragon could be even more? And do you want to go that route as well? I mean, that's a really crude way of putting it. Please watch the other video. I explained it way better. But yeah, this video is already ridiculously long. I wanted this to be shorter, and it turned out to be longer. I don't know how. I'm just really good at talking, I guess. A lot. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Which one do I like more? I like both equally. Yeah, I know. Suck it, okay? There's no point, again, in picking one or the other right now. It makes zero sense. It's like having two 10-year-olds next to each other and somebody asking you, which one do you think is going to be richer by the time they're 30 years old? I don't know. Who knows? I don't know what's going to happen. Let's just wait and see. There's no point in picking one or the other right now. It's absolutely dumb. You guys would make all terrible investors. Okay, like, just stop it, okay? The smart ones are the ones that are just keeping their mouth shut or enjoying both, all right? The people who are like, I'm just this one, die hard this one, that's it. Listen, I know I'm much less reserved than I was in the first part about this now, okay? It's been 3.5 months. Nothing really has changed in the point of one way or the other. Some people maybe trust SMS more now. Some people maybe trust Omega Studios more. I think both companies are doing great. I think both companies are working towards their goals, and we will be seeing something in the future because both these companies are really determined, and they want to make the best product they possibly can. And that's really the best that we can really ask for, right? So who cares really who wins and who doesn't? We'll see what happens in the future. Don't pick sides right now. It's really dumb. Okay, that was my PSA. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, drop a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Check me out on Twitch, yada, yada, yada. And as always, make sure you have a wonderful day. Peace. Hey, bro. Nice ult, Decker. Congratulations, Dumbo.
Double kill.